Jeffrey Dahmer drilled holes into living victims' skulls and poured boiling water directly into their brains. He wasn't trying to kill them, he was trying to create zombies. And that's just the beginning of what you're about to learn, because some serial killers don't just murder people, they turn them into lab rats. Holy shit, this actually happened, and by the end of this video, your worst nightmare is going to feel like a Disney movie. Look, we all think we know serial killers, right? We've seen the movies, we've binged the documentaries. But here's what Netflix doesn't tell you. Some of these monsters weren't just killing people, they were conducting experiments, like twisted scientists with human test subjects. Imagine your worst doctor's visit. Now imagine that doctor has zero medical training, unlimited time, and absolutely no intention of letting you leave alive. Between 1978 and 1991 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Jeffrey Dahmer performed brain surgery on at least 7 living victims. In 1893 Chicago, H.H. Holmes built an entire hotel designed as a human laboratory. And in 1985 California, 2 men created an underground bunker specifically for psychological torture experiments. These weren't random acts of violence. These were systematic research projects. Like, if your college psychology professor went completely insane and decided humans were the perfect test subjects. And the scariest part? Some of these victims were just regular people, going about their normal day, until they weren't. Let's start with Jeffrey Dahmer's zombie experiments, because yes, that's actually what he called them. Dahmer's goal was simple: create a living person who couldn't leave him, someone who would be completely under his control, forever. So he developed a process. First, he'd drug his victims. Then, while they were unconscious but still alive, he'd use a power drill with a 7/8 inch bit to bore holes directly into their skulls. But here's where it gets truly horrific. He'd inject hydrochloric acid and boiling water directly into their brains, using a turkey baster. The victims would wake up, but they weren't the same people anymore. They'd survive for hours, sometimes days, in vegetative states. Unable to speak, unable to move properly, but still conscious enough to experience what was happening to them. It was like the world's most twisted Uber ride. You get in thinking you're going somewhere safe, and you end up as someone's science experiment. Dahmer kept detailed journals of these experiments, like he was conducting legitimate research. Except his lab was an apartment in Milwaukee, and his test subjects were human beings who just wanted to go home. And the worst part? One victim actually escaped. May 27, 1991. 14-year-old Konarak Synthesomphone stumbled out of Dahmer's apartment building, naked, bleeding from his head, speaking incoherently. 2 women called 911. Police arrived, and here's where this story becomes absolutely unbelievable. Dahmer convinced the police that Synthesomphone was his 19-year-old boyfriend who'd had too much to drink. The officers believed him, and they escorted the boy back to Dahmer's apartment. 3 days later, police found Synthesomphone's body, with acid burns in his brain. Forensic psychologists later explained that Dahmer's experiments were based on a real medical procedure called lobotomy. But lobotomies were performed by trained surgeons on anesthetized patients. Dahmer was performing them on conscious victims with household chemicals. Think about that next time you're walking alone at night. Synthesomphone thought he was safe when he saw those police officers. He probably felt relief for the first time in hours. But Dahmer wasn't the only one conducting human experiments. In fact, he wasn't even the most systematic. Because 2,000 miles away in California, 2 men were building something that would make Dahmer's apartment look like a playground. Leonard Lake and Charles Ng called it Operation Miranda, and it was the most organized torture experiment in American criminal history. Between 1983 and 1985, they built an underground bunker on Lake's property in Calaveras County, California. 8 feet by 10 feet, concrete walls, one-way mirror, video cameras recording 24 hours a day. Their goal wasn't just to kill people, it was to study the complete psychological breakdown of human beings. They wanted to document exactly how long it takes to destroy someone's will to live. They had a 4-phase process. Phase 1, kidnap entire families. Phase 2, immediately kill the men and children in front of the women. Phase 3, keep the women alive for weeks of documented torture. Phase 4. Murder them when they became, quote, boring. Police found 40 hours of video footage, 40 hours of systematic torture experiments. One tape shows a mother being forced to watch her baby's murder. Another shows Lake calmly explaining his research methodology to the camera while a victim screams in the background. Criminal psychologists who studied the tapes said Lake and Ng treated their victims like laboratory specimens. They documented psychological responses to different types of trauma. They timed how long it took for complete mental breakdown. They were conducting research. And here's the part that'll keep you awake tonight. They killed 25 people, but they only got caught because Lake was arrested for shoplifting. I know what you're thinking. How is this even possible? How do two people build an underground torture laboratory without anyone noticing? Well, it turns out they weren't the first ones to think of it. Chicago, 1893. The World's Fair is bringing millions of visitors to the city, and H.H. Holmes is ready for them. Holmes built a 3-story hotel specifically for the fair, but this wasn't just any hotel. It was a murder castle, designed from the ground up as a human experimentation facility. 100 rooms, hidden passages between walls, gas chambers disguised as regular hotel rooms, soundproof torture chambers with medieval devices, chutes leading directly to a basement crematorium, and acid vats for dissolving bodies. Holmes killed an estimated 200 people over 3 years, but he wasn't just killing them. He was experimenting on them. He performed surgery on conscious victims without anesthesia. He tested how long humans could survive without food or water. He experimented with different poison combinations. And he kept detailed records of everything. But here's the truly twisted part. Holmes was making money from his experiments. He took out life insurance policies on his victims. He tortured them until they signed over their assets. He sold their skeletons to medical schools after cleaning them. Holmes made over $50,000 per victim. That's equivalent to $1.5 million today. He turned human experimentation into a profitable business. FBI behavioral analysts later studied Holmes's methods and concluded he was one of the first serial killers to approach murder as a systematic business operation. He wasn't killing out of rage or passion. He was conducting research and development. But wait, there's more. Because we haven't even talked about the psychological experiments yet. Dennis Rader, BTK, bind, torture, kill. Between 1974 and 1991 in Kansas, he didn't just murder 10 people. He studied their fear responses like a twisted psychology professor. Rader would break into homes and wait for families to return. Then he'd tie up entire families and force them to watch each other's torture. But here's the sick part. He was timing how long it took victims to break psychologically. The Otero family, his first victims, parents and 2 children, ages 9 and 11. Rader spent 4 hours torturing them. He forced the parents to watch their children die first, and he documented their psychological deterioration in real time. And that brings us to the question you're probably asking right now. How does this connect to today? Well, buckle up, because it's more relevant than you think. First, consider how these killers found their victims. Dahmer used dating apps before dating apps existed. He'd hang out at bars and clubs, looking for lonely people who wouldn't be missed immediately. Sound familiar? That's literally how modern predators use Tinder and Grindr. Holmes used the World's Fair to attract victims, millions of people traveling alone to a new city. Today, that's every music festival, every convention, every major event where people travel solo. Second, the technology these killers used is now available to everyone. Dahmer's power drill? You can buy that at Home Depot. Holmes's soundproofing materials? Amazon Prime delivery. The chemicals Lake and Ng used? Available online with no background check. But here's what's really important. Every single one of these victims had opportunities to escape, and some of them took those opportunities. Konarak Synthosom phone escaped Dahmer's apartment. He made it to the street. He found help. The system failed him, but he did everything right. He fought back when it mattered most. Imagine being in that underground bunker with Lake and Ng, knowing that every day you survive is another day to find a way out. Some victims lasted weeks. They didn't give up. They kept looking for their chance. The lesson isn't that these things are inevitable. The lesson is that survival comes down to recognizing danger early and trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. But here's the detail that's going to haunt you forever. Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. Between 1982 and 1998, he murdered 71 women in Washington state. But Ridgway didn't just kill them. He returned to dump sites to observe body decomposition. He moved bodies to study decay rates in different environments. He had sex with corpses at various stages of decomposition. Ridgway kept detailed mental notes on decomposition timelines. He tested which locations preserved bodies longest. He experimented with different methods of concealment. He studied how weather affected decay rates. And he used this research to improve his disposal methods. Which brings us to the most chilling part of this entire story. Here's the detail that's going to stick with you long after this video ends. Every single one of these killers was caught by accident. Dahmer was arrested because a victim escaped and flagged down police. Lake and Ng were caught shoplifting. Holmes was investigated for insurance fraud, not murder. BTK was caught because he sent a floppy disk to police that contained metadata. None of them were caught because of their experiments. They were caught because of stupid mistakes, which means there were probably others. Killers who were more careful, who didn't make those mistakes, who conducted their experiments, and were never caught. The FBI estimates there are 25 to 50 active serial killers in the United States at any given time. How many of them are conducting experiments? How many victims are out there right now, being treated like lab rats by someone who thinks they're conducting research? And here's the conversation starter you're going to share with everyone you know. Dahmer's brain experiments actually worked. For a few hours, he successfully created living humans who couldn't resist his commands. The technique was so effective that the CIA studied his methods for potential use in interrogation. If this video made you question everything you thought you knew about serial killers, you need to watch our video about the most disturbing unsolved cases that'll make you never want to leave your house again. Because the truth is, the monsters we catch are just the ones who got sloppy. The really dangerous ones? They're still out there, still experimenting, still learning. Sweet dreams.